They thought they could crush me with their petty rules, but I turned their precious lake into my empire. The HOA's lawsuit was their last desperate swing, and I dodged it with a plan so bold it left them speechless. My name's Ethan Carter, and this is how I made Greenview Pines beg for mercy. By the end, their own greed drowned them, and I stood taller than ever. If you're hiding from your own HOA nightmares, stick around. This story will blow your mind. I moved to Greenview Pines, a fancy neighborhood in upstate New York, looking for peace after my sister's sudden death. She loved lakes, and the 10-acre Willow Lake in the center of the community seemed like the perfect place to honor her memory. I bought a house on Maple Lane, thinking I'd spend quiet evenings fishing with my nephew, Liam, who was 12 and struggling to cope without his mom. The realtor gushed about the lake, calling it a community gem, but mentioned the HOA in passing, saying they were strict but fair. I brushed it off. I'd dealt with worse in my old job as a corporate lawyer. How bad could it be? If you love stories like this, where the little guy fights back, hit that subscribe button for more HOA drama on our channel. It didn't take long to find out. 2 months in, Liam and I were at the lake, casting lines from a small dock. He'd just caught a tiny bass, his first smile in weeks, when a sharp voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" A woman in her late 50s, dressed in crisp white linen, stormed toward us, clutching a tablet like a weapon. Her name was Linda Harris, the HOA president, and her icy stare screamed control freak. "I'm Ethan Carter," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Just fishing with my nephew." She didn't even glance at Liam, who froze, clutching his rod. "Fishing is banned," she snapped. "It's a violation of HOA rules. You'll be fined $600. I blinked, stunned. The realtor said fishing was allowed. It's why I moved here. Linda's lips curled into a smug smile. "The rules changed last month. Check your email. Ignorance isn't an excuse." I felt Liam tense beside me, his joy crumbling. "We're not hurting anyone," I said, trying to stay polite. "We clean up after ourselves." Linda tapped her tablet, ignoring me. "The lake's for viewing, not your little hobbies. Hooks hurt wildlife, and bait stinks up the air. Residents deserve better." Her tone dripped with disdain, like we were trespassers in her kingdom. I asked to see the rule change, but she waved me off. It was emailed. "Pay the fine or we'll escalate." As she marched away, Liam whispered, "Why is she so mean?" I didn't have an answer, but anger burned in my chest. This wasn't just about a fine, it was personal. That night, I scoured my inbox, including spam, and found no email about the fishing ban. Something felt off. I started digging into the HOA's website and found a dusty forum where residents vented about Linda's iron grip. One post caught my eye. "Linda's been president for 10 years. She finds new people to scare them into line." Another mentioned her real estate side gig, hinting she profited off foreclosed homes. My lawyer instincts kicked in. I called an old friend, Mike, who ran a title company. "Can you check who owns Willow Lake?" I asked. He laughed. "You stirring trouble already?" But he agreed to dig. The next day, I ran into a neighbor, Sarah Thompson, a retired teacher with kind eyes but a wary edge. She'd lived in Greenview for 15 years. "You got on Linda's bad side," she said, glancing around. She fined me $200 for planting roses without approval. Said they were too red. I told her about the fishing fine, and she sighed. "Linda's got a knack for targeting newcomers. Be careful, she's got eyes everywhere." Her warning stuck with me, but so did her hesitation, like she knew more than she was saying. I decided to test the waters. "Ever hear about Linda buying up properties?" I asked. Sarah's face tightened. "Meet me at the library tomorrow, 3 p.m. We'll talk." As I walk home, I noticed a sleek black SUV parked across from my house, idling too long. The driver wore sunglasses, and I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Back inside, Mike called with a bombshell. Willow Lake isn't owned by the HOA. It's held by Pineview Holdings, a developer who leased it to the HOA 25 years ago. That lease ends in 3 months. My mind raced. If Linda was enforcing rules on a lake she didn't own, what else was she hiding? I knew that I wasn't just fighting a fine, I was up against a bigger game. and I was ready to play. The library meeting with Sarah felt like stepping into a spy movie. She sat in a corner, hidden behind a stack of gardening books, her eyes darting to the door. "Linda's not just strict," she whispered. "She's running a scam." My heart raced as she slid a folder across the table, stuffed with old HOA notices. "These are from families who left Greenview," she said. "Fines for stupid things, wrong mailbox color, kids' bikes on driveways. Most sold their homes cheap after Linda's harassment." I flipped through the papers, noticing a pattern. Every sold house was bought by a company called Harris Properties. "That's Linda's business," Sarah confirmed. "She's been driving people out to flip their homes for profit." I leaned back, stunned. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Sarah's voice dropped. "Because she's got friends in high places. The mayor, Tom Bradley, golfs with her husband. And the HOA board's her puppet show." She pointed to a name in the folder, Greg Patel, a former resident. Greg fought back, said he'd sue. Then his car got vandalized, and he got a $1,000 fine for unapproved fence paint. He moved out a month later. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about my fishing fine anymore. Linda was a predator, and I was her latest target. Before I could ask more, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Someone's coming." A man in a polo shirt lingered near the history section, pretending to read, but glancing our way. "That's Dan, Linda's treasurer," she hissed. We slipped out through a side exit, my mind buzzing. Back home, I called Mike again. "Check if Harris Properties links to Willow Lake's owner, Pineview Holdings." He chuckled. "You're obsessed, Ethan." But I wasn't laughing. That black SUV was parked down the street again, and I swore I saw Dan's face in the driver's seat. The next morning, a letter arrived from the HOA. They'd upped my fine to $1,200 for repeat lake violations, and threatened a lien on my house if I didn't pay in 10 days. Liam saw the letter and looked scared. "Are we going to lose our house?" he asked. I hugged him tight. "No way, buddy. I'll fix this." My anger boiled over. Linda wasn't just coming for me. She was scaring my nephew. That's when I decided to fight dirty. I reached out to an old law school buddy, Rachel Kim, who specialized in real estate fraud. "I need dirt on a shady HOA president," I told her. She laughed. "Sounds like fun. Send me everything." Rachel worked fast. By evening, she called with a twist that made my jaw drop. "Harris Properties is a front. It's owned by a shell company tied to Linda's cousin. But the real kicker? Pineview Holdings, the lake's owner, is bankrupt. They're desperate to sell assets, and Linda's been cozying up to their CEO to buy the lake cheap." I froze. "So she's planning to own the lake herself?" Rachel's voice was grim. "Yup. And turn it into condos. She's been banning fishing to clear the area for her big pitch." My blood ran cold. Linda wasn't just a bully. She was a schemer plotting to steal the community's heart for profit. I needed more allies. Sarah introduced me to Jamal Wilson, a mechanic who'd lived in Greenview for 20 years. He'd been fined $800 for parking his work truck in his driveway. "Linda hates anyone who doesn't fit her perfect neighborhood," he said bitterly. She told me my truck lowered property values. Jamal had a fire in his eyes, and I knew he was in. We met at his garage, away from prying eyes, and formed a plan. "We need proof Linda's breaking laws," I said. Jamal grinned. "I know a guy who hacks security cameras. Let's see what Linda's hiding." That night, Jamal's contact, a quiet tech nerd named Carlos, showed us grainy footage from a camera near Linda's house. It showed her meeting Mayor Bradley in her backyard, handing him an envelope. "That's a bribe," Carlos said. "Bet it's for zoning favors when she buys the lake." My heart pounded. We had her on tape, but it wasn't enough. Then Carlos froze the screen. "Look at this." The footage showed Linda tossing a bag into her trash, marked with a chemical company logo. "That's weed killer," Jamal said. "Illegal to dump near the lake. It poisons fish." I realized Linda's fishing ban wasn't just about condos. She was poisoning the lake to kill its value, making it easier to buy cheap. The twists kept coming, and I knew we were close to cracking her game. But as I left Jamal's garage, headlights flashed behind me. The black SUV was back, tailing me through the dark streets. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. Linda knew I was digging, and she wasn't playing nice anymore. The black SUV followed me for 3 blocks before peeling off into the night. My hands shook as I parked in my driveway, checking the mirrors for any sign of Dan or Linda's goons. Inside, Liam was asleep, his fishing rod propped against the wall. Seeing it fueled my resolve. Linda wasn't just a bully, she was a criminal, and I was going to take her down. But I needed more than grainy footage of a bribe. I called Rachel, my lawyer friend, and filled her in on the chemical bag. If Linda's dumping poison in the lake, that's a federal offense, she said. Get me hard proof, Ethan, and we can bury her. The next morning, I met Jamal and Carlos at a diner outside Greenview to stay off Linda's radar. Carlos had hacked into more cameras and found something chilling. Linda's been at the lake late at night, he said, showing a time-stamped clip. It was her, alone, pouring liquid from a canister near the dock where Liam and I fished. That's got to be the weed killer, Jamal said. She's killing the fish to tank the lake's value. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just about money. Linda was destroying the lake my sister loved. But then Carlos dropped a bigger bomb. There's another clip. She's meeting someone tonight at midnight. At the lake. Who? I asked, leaning forward. Carlos shrugged. Can't tell. The guy's face is hidden, but he's got a City Hall badge. My mind raced. Mayor Bradley? Or someone higher up. We decided to catch them in the act. That night, Jamal and I hid in the bushes near the dock, cameras ready. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle made my heart jump. At 12:05, Linda appeared, carrying a bag. A man in a dark jacket joined her, his voice low. You sure the sale's locked? He asked. Linda nodded. Pineview's desperate. I'll own the lake by next month. I zoomed in, catching her smug grin. Then the man turned, and my breath caught. It wasn't the mayor, it was Paul Decker, the county zoning commissioner. You'll get your cut, Linda said, handing him a thick envelope. Jamal nudged me, whispering, we got her. But before we could slip away, Linda's head snapped toward us. Who's there? She barked, pulling out a flashlight. We froze as the beam swept inches from our hiding spot. My heart pounded, so loud I thought she'd hear it. Paul grabbed her arm. Probably a raccoon. Let's go. They left, and I exhaled, shaking. We had explosive evidence, but Linda was onto us. Back at Jamal's garage, we reviewed the footage. It was gold, clear audio of Linda's bribe and her plan to buy the lake. Rachel was thrilled when I sent it over. This is enough for a criminal investigation, she said. But we need the chemical proof to seal it. I remembered the dock where Linda poured the liquid. I'll get a sample, I told Jamal. The next day, I snuck to the lake at dawn, wearing gloves and carrying a vial. The water near the dock had a faint chemical smell, and dead fish floated nearby. I scooped a sample, but as I stood, Dan's voice rang out. Carter, you're trespassing. He charged toward me, phone in hand, probably calling Linda. I bolted, clutching the vial, and ducked into the woods. Dan was fast, but I knew the paths from fishing with Liam. I lost him and made it home, heart racing. That evening, another HOA letter arrived, this time threatening a lawsuit for damaging community property. Linda was escalating, but I wasn't backing down. I called Sarah, who'd been quiet since the library. I found something, she said, her voice shaky. Meet me at my house. Alone. Sarah's living room was cluttered with old HOA files. She handed me a document, her hands trembling. This is from 10 years ago. Linda tried to buy the lake back then, but the HOA board stopped her. Guess who was on that board? She pointed to a name, Greg Patel, the guy who'd fought her and lost. After Greg left, his house burned down. The fire was ruled accidental, but my skin crawled. Was Linda capable of arson? Sarah's eyes were wide. She's dangerous, Ethan. And she knows you're digging. As I left Sarah's, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop snooping, or Liam pays. My blood ran cold. I raced home, finding Liam safe but shaken. Some guy was outside, watching the house, he said. The black SUV was back, parked across the street. Linda wasn't just playing dirty. She was threatening my family. I knew we were close to cracking her, but the stakes were higher than ever. I had to protect Liam and end this before she struck first. The threatening text about Liam kept me up all night, my phone clutched tight. Linda had crossed a line, and fear mixed with my anger. I hid the chemical sample in a lockbox and moved Liam to my sister's old cabin an hour away, where my cousin could watch him. "I'll fix this, buddy," I promised, hating the worry in his eyes. Back in Greenview, I called Rachel. "Linda's threatening my nephew," I said, voice shaking. Rachel's tone was sharp. "She's desperate. That means we're close." The water sample tested positive for a legal herbicide. It's enough for the EPA to investigate. I felt a spark of hope, but Linda wasn't done. That afternoon, a tow truck pulled up to Jamal's garage, hauling away his work truck. "HOA says it's a zoning violation," the driver told him. Jamal's face was thunder. "This is Linda's payback for helping you." We knew she was tightening the screws, but a new twist hit hard. Carlos called, panicked. "Someone hacked my laptop. The bribe footage is gone." My heart sank. Linda had someone on the inside, covering her tracks. But Carlos had a backup on a flash drive, hidden in his car. "Meet me tonight," he said. "We can't let her win." Before the meeting, I went to an HOA board meeting, hoping to gauge Linda's next move. The room was tense, with residents whispering about rising fines. Linda stood at the podium, all smiles, but her eyes locked on me. "Some residents think they're above the rules," she said, staring me down. "We're filing a lawsuit against Ethan Carter for lake vandalism." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My neighbor, Maria Lopez, leaned over. "She's lying, right?" I nodded, but my gut twisted. Linda was painting me as the villain to turn the community against me. Then a man stood up, Greg Patel, the guy Sarah mentioned, who'd fought Linda years ago. His voice was steady. "Linda's the real crook. She tried to buy the lake back then, and when I called her out, my house burned down." The room erupted in murmurs. Linda's face went red. "That's slander, Greg. Sit down." But Greg kept going. "I'm back, and I've got proof you're still scamming." He held up a folder, and Linda's treasurer, Dan, lunged for it. I jumped in, grabbing Dan's arm. "Back off," I snapped. The meeting dissolved into chaos, and I slipped out with Greg. Outside, Greg showed me his evidence. Bank records linking Linda's company to shady lakefront deals. "She's been bribing officials for years," he said. "I left town, but I'm done running." His return was a game changer, but danger followed fast. As we talked, a brick sailed through my car window, missing my head by inches. A note tied to it read, "Last warning." Greg pulled me behind a tree as the black SUV sped off. "That's Linda's muscle," he said. "She hires local thugs." My fear spiked, but Greg's resolve hardened mine. "We end this together," I said. I met Carlos at a park, where he handed me the flash drive. "This is our ace," he said, but his hands shook. "Linda's got my boss watching me. If she finds out, I promise to keep him safe," but as I drove away, my phone rang. It was Sarah whispering, "Ethan, Linda's at the lake right now. She's dumping more chemicals." I followed her. My pulse raced. This was our chance to catch her red-handed. I grabbed Jamal and Greg, and we sped to the lake, cameras ready. We hid behind trees, watching Linda pour from a canister. The moonlight caught her face, pure malice. But then headlights flashed, and Paul Decker, the zoning guy, stepped out of a car. "You're moving too slow," he hissed. "The sale's at risk." Linda laughed. "Relax. Carter's done. I've got a lawyer who'll crush him." My blood boiled. They were plotting my ruin, but we were recording every word. Then Sarah tripped, snapping a branch. Linda spun around, her flashlight blinding us. "You," she screamed, charging forward. Paul bolted, but Linda pulled something from her bag, a knife. Jamal tackled her, knocking the knife away, but she clawed at him, shrieking. Greg and I dragged her back, and Sarah called 911. Cops arrived, and we showed them the footage and chemical sample. Linda's face went pale as they cuffed her, but she spat at me. "This isn't over, Carter." As they took her away, I noticed Dan watching from the crowd, slipping into the shadows. The victory felt hollow. Linda was down, but her allies were still out there, and that note about Liam haunted me. We had to finish this before they struck back. Linda's arrest sent shockwaves through Greenview Pines, but I knew the fight wasn't over. Her venomous glare as the cops hauled her away stuck with me, and Dan's disappearance from a lake scene screamed trouble. I brought Liam back home, but kept the doors locked and curtains drawn. "Is she gone for good?" he asked, his voice small. I forced a smile. "We're getting there, buddy." Inside, my nerves were on edge. Rachel called with good news. "The EPA's launching a full investigation into the lake poisoning," she said. "Your evidence is airtight." But then she dropped a twist. "Linda's lawyer just filed a countersuit against you for defamation. She's claiming you framed her." My jaw clenched. Even in cuffs, Linda was swinging. I met Greg and Jamal at Sarah's house to regroup. Sarah looked rattled, clutching a coffee mug. "Dan's been calling board members, saying Linda's innocent," she said. "He's rallying her loyalists." Greg slammed his fist on the table. "She's got half the HOA brainwashed. We need to hit harder." That's when Mike, my title company friend, called with a bombshell. "Pineview Holdings just put Willow Lake up for sale. Auctions in 5 days. Linda's cousin is bidding through a proxy." My blood ran hot. Linda was still pulling strings from jail, trying to steal the lake. I saw my chance. "What if I buy the lake?" I said. Jamal raised an eyebrow. "You got that kind of cash?" As a corporate lawyer, I'd saved enough to make a move. Greg grinned. "Do it. Cut her off at the knees." Rachel agreed to handle the legal side, but warned me. "If Linda's people find out, they'll come for you." That night, I got a call from an unknown number. A raspy voice hissed, "Drop the lake bid, or your house burns." My heart stopped. Greg's story about his house, fire flashed in my mind. I hung up, but the black SUV was back, idling outside. The next day, I went to the county office to dig into Linda's cousin's bid. A clerk, Emma, slipped me a file after I mentioned the lake. "You didn't get this from me," she whispered. The file showed Linda's cousin wasn't just bidding. He was funneling money from Harris Properties to bribe auction officials. Another twist, Paul Decker, the zoning guy, was listed as a consultant for the sale. They were rigging the auction. I texted Rachel the files, but as I left, Dan cornered me in the parking lot. "You're digging too deep, Carter," he sneered, stepping close. "Walk away, or Liam won't be safe." I shoved past him, my fear turning to rage. That evening, Maria, my neighbor, knocked on my door, frantic. Someone broke into my garage. They left a note saying I'd be fined $2,000 for clutter. It's Linda's handwriting. My stomach dropped. Linda was in jail, so who was doing her dirty work? I called Carlos, who'd been laying low. "Check the HOA's security cameras," I said. He hacked in and found footage of Dan sneaking into Maria's garage, holding a note. But the real shock came next. "There's another clip," Carlos said. "It's Linda, in jail, meeting Mayor Bradley. They're talking about you." We got the jail footage through a contact Rachel had. It showed Linda smirking as she told Bradley, "Carter's bidding on the lake. Make sure he doesn't win." Bradley nodded. "I'll lean on the auctioneer." My anger flared. They were conspiring behind bars, and Dan was their enforcer. I decided to play their game. I met Emma, the clerk, again, and slipped her $500 to tip me off if Linda's cousin upped his bid. She hesitated, then nodded. "They doubled their offer last night," she said. "But there's a third bidder. Anonymous." My mind spun. Who else was after the lake? Jamal, and I tailed Dan that night, hoping to catch him slipping. He went to a bar outside town, meeting a guy in a suit. I recognized him, Tom Reynolds, a developer who tried to buy Greenview land years ago. "He's the anonymous bidder," Jamal whispered. "We overheard Reynolds say, 'Linda's out. I'm taking the lake.'" My heart raced. Linda's own ally was betraying her, but that made him my enemy too. As we left, Dan spotted us and smirked, like he wanted us to know he was untouchable. Back home, I found my front door ajar. My pulse spiked as I stepped inside, grabbing a baseball bat. The lockbox with the chemical sample was gone. A note on the counter read, "You can't win." Dan had broken in, and Linda's grip was tightening, even from jail. I knew the auction was my last shot to crush her, but with Reynolds and Dan circling, The danger was closing in fast. The stolen lockbox felt like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't giving up. Linda's crew was playing hardball, and with the lake auction 3 days away, every move counted. I called Rachel, my voice tight. Dan took the chemical sample. We're losing leverage. She stayed calm. The EPA still has your first sample, and the jail footage is with the DA. Focus on the auction. I nodded, but fear gnawed at me. Liam was safe at the cabin, but Dan's threat and that note, "You can't win," echoed in my head. I had to outsmart Linda and her allies before they hit harder. I met Greg and Jamal at a coffee shop to plan. Greg's eyes were sharp. Reynolds, the developer, is our real problem now. He's got more cash than Linda's cousin. Jamal cracked his knuckles. Then we take him out of the game. Carlos, still jumpy from the laptop hack, joined us with a new find. I got into Reynolds' emails. He's been meeting Dan in secret. They're planning to tank your bid, Ethan. My stomach twisted. Dan wasn't just Linda's muscle. He was double-crossing her with Reynolds. The betrayal added a new layer to this mess. Carlos showed us an email where Reynolds promised Dan a cut if the lake deal went through. "They're bribing the auctioneer to ignore your bid," he said. I clenched my fists. Then we exposed them. Rachel had a contact at the local news, a reporter named Lisa Chun. I sent her the jail footage and Reynolds' emails, keeping my name out of it. By evening, Lisa texted me. "Stories airing tomorrow. This'll blow the auction wide open." I felt a rush, but danger was closing in. That night, the black SUV parked closer to my house, its engine humming like a warning. The next morning, Maria ran to my door panicked. Someone spray-painted snitch on my garage. My heart sank. Dan was targeting anyone close to me. I told her to stay with Sarah for safety. Then Emma, the county clerk, called with a twist. Reynolds just pulled out of the auction. Said he's spooked by bad press. The news story had worked, but Emma's voice shook. Linda's cousin upped his bid again, and Dan's been at the county office all day. He's pushing hard. My mind raced. Dan was running the show now, and I had to move fast. I decided to confront the auctioneer, a nervous guy named Steve. I found him at his office, sweating behind a desk. "I know Dan's bribing you," I said, bluffing with confidence. Steve's eyes widened. "I didn't take anything. Dan just suggested I favor certain bids." I leaned in. "Ignore Dan, or the news gets your name next." Steve nodded fast, promising a fair auction. As I left, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Check the HOA forum." Now, I pulled it up and froze. Someone had posted my address, calling me a troublemaker who'd framed Linda. The post was anonymous, but Dan's fingerprints were all over it. That evening, Greg uncovered a game changer. "I found an old contract," he said, holding up a faded document. "The HOA's lease on the lake has a clause. If the lease ends, the owner can ban the community from access forever." My pulse quickened. If I won the lake, I could lock Linda's precious neighborhood out. It was the ultimate revenge. But then Jamal called, his voice low. "Carlos is missing. His car's at his apartment, but he's gone." Fear hit me like ice. Had Dan grabbed him? We raced to Carlos' place, finding his door ajar. Inside, his laptop was smashed and a note read, "Stay out of the auction." We searched for Carlos, but my phone rang. Lisa, the reporter. "Big update. The DA's charging Linda with fraud and bribery, thanks to your footage. But there's more. Dan's been seen with a guy tied to organized crime. Be careful." My blood ran cold. Dan wasn't just a thug. He had dangerous friends. As we left Carlos' apartment, headlights flashed. The black SUV screeched toward us, and I dove behind a dumpster with Jamal. The car stopped, and Dan stepped out, holding a crowbar. "You're done, Carter," he yelled, smashing my car's windshield. Jamal pulled me back as Dan sped off, laughing. I called Rachel, barely keeping it together. "Dan's out of control, and Carlos is gone." She was grim. "File a police report, but don't stop. The auction's your shot to end this." Then Sarah texted a photo that changed everything. A shot of Carlos, tied up in a warehouse, with Dan's shadow in the frame. "Found this on a hacked camera," she wrote. "It's near the lake." My heart pounded. Dan was holding Carlos hostage to scare me off the auction. The stakes were sky high, and with Linda's charges mounting and Dan turning violent, I knew the next move could make or break us. The photo of Carlos, tied up in a warehouse, lit a fire in me, but fear for his safety gripped my chest. Dan was playing a deadly game, and the auction was tomorrow. I called the police, sending them Sarah's photo, but they moved slow, saying they needed more evidence to raid the warehouse. Rachel was blunt. "You can't wait, Ethan. Save Carlos and win the lake, or Dan's crew will crush you." I rallied Jamal and Greg at my house, my hands shaking as we planned a rescue. "The warehouse is by the lake," I said. "We go tonight." Jamal nodded, but Greg looked grim. "Dan's got mob ties. This could get ugly." We drove to the lake under cover of darkness, parking far from the warehouse to avoid the black SUV. The building was old, with broken windows and a rusty door. We crept closer, hearing muffled voices. Peeking through a crack, I saw Carlos tied to a chair, his face bruised. Dan paced nearby, talking to a guy with a scar across his cheek, definitely the mob contact Lisa mentioned. "Carter's done," Dan said. "He won't bid tomorrow." Scarface laughed. "Good. The lake's ours." My blood boiled. They weren't just after me, they were stealing the lake for themselves. Jamal whispered, "We need a distraction." He tossed a rock at a nearby car, setting off its alarm. Dan and Scarface ran outside cursing. I slipped in, cutting Carlos free with a pocket knife. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, shaky. They wanted the flash drive. We ducked out a back exit, but Dan's voice roared behind us. "Carter." He charged, crowbar raised. Greg tackled him, and they hit the ground hard. Jamal grabbed a pipe, holding off Scarface as I pulled Carlos to safety. Sirens wailed. Sarah had tipped the cops. Dan and Scarface bolted, but the police nabbed Scarface in the parking lot. Dan vanished into the woods. At the station, Carlos gave a statement, and the cops promised to hunt Dan. But a new twist hit. Rachel called. "The auction's been moved up. It's in 3 hours, and Linda's cousin is the only other bidder." My heart raced. Dan's attack was a distraction to keep me from bidding. I rushed home, grabbing my laptop to join the online auction. Emma, the clerk, texted a warning. "Dan's at the county office. He's with the auctioneer." My stomach dropped. He was rigging it again. I called Lisa, the reporter, and begged her to air a breaking story about Dan's mob ties. "It's already live," she said. "The auctioneer's panicking." The auction started, and I bid fast, my savings on the line. Linda's cousin countered, but the room felt electric. Lisa's story was shaking things up. Then a third bidder jumped in, anonymous. My pulse spiked. Was it Dan? The bids climbed, and I pushed my limit, sweating. Rachel texted, "Keep going. The cousin's funds are frozen, DA's orders." Another twist. Linda's bribery charges had tanked her cousin's bank account. I bid higher, and the anonymous bidder dropped out. The gavel fell. Willow Lake was mine. I exhaled, stunned, but joy mixed with dread. Dan was still out there. I drove to the lake, needing to see it as mine. Sarah and Maria met me, cheering, but Greg was quiet. "Dan won't stop," he said. "He's got nothing to lose." As we walked the shore, a glint caught my eye, a burner phone half buried in the mud. I picked it up, and its screen lit up with a text, "You won the lake. Now you die." My hands went cold. Dan had been here, watching. Before I could react, Jamal shouted, "Look." Across the lake, a figure stood in the shadows. Dan, holding a gas can. He lit a match, and flames sparked near the dock. We ran toward him, but Dan sprinted into the trees. The fire was small, and Sarah stomped it out, coughing. "He's trying to scare us," she said, but her voice shook. I called the cops, who found the gas can with Dan's prints. They issued a warrant, but he was a ghost. That night, Rachel dropped another bomb. The HOA board just voted to sue you for banning lake access. Dan's behind it, rallying Linda's loyalists. My victory felt hollow. Owning the lake was my revenge, but Dan was turning the community against me, and his threats were escalating. I sat with Liam, explaining the win. The lake's ours, like your mom would have wanted, I said. He hugged me, but his eyes were scared. Is Dan gonna hurt us? I promised he wouldn't, but doubt gnawed at me. The burner phone buzzed again. Check your backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and found a knife stabbed into my deck with a note, tomorrow. Dan was closing in, and with the HOA's lawsuit looming, I had to end this war before it cost me everything. The knife in my deck felt like Dan's final warning, and with the HOA's lawsuit against me, the pressure was crushing. I moved Liam back to the cabin for safety, then called Rachel. Can we stop the lawsuit? I asked. Her voice was steady. You own the lake, Ethan. The old lease lets you ban the HOA. Their case is weak, but Dan's stirring up the board. I knew he was out for blood, and that burner phone text, tomorrow, meant he was planning something big. I wasn't just fighting for the lake anymore. I was fighting for our lives. I gathered Greg, Jamal, Sarah, and Maria at my house to plan. Greg had news. The cops tracked Dan to a motel, but he slipped away. They found maps of the lake marked with your house. My heart sank. He was hunting me. Sarah's voice shook. The HOA's holding an emergency meeting tonight. Dan's pushing to seize the lake as community property. Jamal slammed his fist down. Let's crash it and end this. We agreed to confront the board, expose Dan, and rally the residents. But a twist hit hard. Carlos texted from hiding. Found Dan's burner phone records. He's been texting Linda, in jail. The revelation stunned me. Linda was still pulling strings, guiding Dan from behind bars. Carlos sent a log showing her orders. Ruin Carter. Burn the dock if you have to. My blood ran cold. She'd planned the fire attempt. We printed the texts and headed to the HOA meeting, my nerves on edge. The room was packed, with Dan at the front, smirking like he'd already won. Ethan Carter stole our lake, he said, pointing at me. We're suing to take it back. Residents cheered, but I saw fear in their eyes. Dan was bullying them into line. I stood up, holding the phone logs. Dan's lying. He's working for Linda, who's been scamming you all. I read the text aloud, and gasps filled the room. Maria jumped in. They fined me for nothing, trashed my garage. Greg added, Linda burned my house when I fought her. The crowd turned on Dan, shouting questions. He yelled, lies, but his voice cracked. Then Sarah dropped a bomb. I recorded Dan threatening me yesterday, she said, playing a clip of him saying, back Linda, or your house is next. The room erupted, and Dan bolted for the door. Jamal and I chased him outside, but the black SUV screeched up, and Dan jumped in. It sped off, but not before I saw the driver, Mayor Bradley. My jaw dropped. The mayor wasn't deeper than I thought. I called Lisa, the reporter, and sent her Sarah's recording. By morning, the news ran a story tying Bradley to Linda's crimes. He resigned hours later, and the DA added charges against Linda for conspiracy. But Dan was still loose, and the lawsuit loomed. Rachel had an idea. Turn the lake into a private resort. It's legal, and it'll kill the HOA's case. I loved it. I worked with Rachel to file papers, naming the lake Sophie's Haven after my sister. The resort would be a community space, but HOA members were banned unless they voted out the corrupt board. At the next meeting, I presented my plan. This lake is for everyone, not Linda's cronies, I said. Residents cheered, and a vote ousted Dan's allies. But as I left, a cop pulled me aside. We found Dan. He was hiding at the lake, planning to torch your house. My heart stopped. They'd caught him with gasoline and a lighter, ranting about Linda's orders. The final twist came from Emma, the clerk. Linda's cousin confessed. He was funneling mob money for her lake bid. The DA charged him, and Linda's empire crumbled. The lawsuit collapsed when the new HOA board dropped it, and Sophie's Haven opened to the public, with Liam casting the first fishing line. Residents apologized for doubting me, and Maria hugged me, tears in her eyes. You gave us our home back. Dan got 5 years for arson and threats, and Linda faced a decade for fraud and poisoning. As I stood by the lake, watching Liam fish, I felt peace. Fighting greed took everything, but it taught me standing up for what's right builds something stronger than fear. The moral? Never let bullies win. Hit back with truth and courage, and you'll find allies in the fight. Greenview Pines was free, and Sophie's Haven was my sister's legacy, a reminder that even the darkest battles can end in light.